and Egypt. So what happens often when in history when conquerors occupy a nation's territory, in order to minimize the violence and the resistance, they utilize religion as a way to calm and unify the two groups, the conquerors and the people who are having their country being occupied or conquered. So Serapis the Christ, or Serapis Khrestos, Serapis Christ, was worshipped in Egypt as a god. Serapis had overtaken the attributes from the Greeks, i.e. the attributes of the primary deity, which was Zeus, Hades, and the god of healing, and were enrolled into one, so being the primary god, which they called the Godhead. Subsequently in Egypt, the primary gods were Osiris and his consort or wife Isis. So Serapis was known as Oserapis, or with the attributes of Osiris, or as Zeus in the Greek theology, and all were combined into one, being the Godhead or the primary deity in Egypt. Now, when you say primary deity, that's because there was a secondary deity, and that was Isis, and Isis was the goddess of nurturing and caring. Now, Isis and Serapis combined were worshipped in temples. There were temples built to Isis, and there were temples built and dedicated to Serapis. The Isis religion was actually the widest spread and largest religion in the Mediterranean during the epoch of what we call the origins of Christianity. Serapis was the second largest religion. Serapis Christianity was the second largest religion, followed by what were then called Christians in the Mediterranean. Serapian worship lasted for roughly almost 700 years during the pre-BC times, and then up until 391, when Theodosius got rid of all of the other opposing religions, which if it wasn't what the church, the Catholic Church, supported as Christianity, it was called pagan. So this was another Christianity, but it was considered to be pagan, even though it was it predated the Christianity that you know of in the Catholic history, which is where your Christianity comes from, whether you know that or not. A lot of people don't even know that Americans in their Christianity get their Christianity from Catholicism, and I'll tell that history in another video. So what you have now is you have people all over the Mediterranean worshiping Isis and Serapis, and the primary deity in Egypt and the people of Egypt. Now remember, you got to remember, these are not Europeans in Egypt. These are black Africans in Egypt and their surrounding territories, the territories of places like Jerusalem, and places like Syria, and places like the place we call Constantinople today. These places were all ruled by predominantly black people during this time frame. Now, history doesn't tell you this. History doesn't record this aspect. History doesn't tell you that even in early Europe was ruled by black people. The Europeans that you know today are not genetically the original people of Europe. They came to Europe during the what they call the Indo-European invasion or migration, the Indo-European invasion or migration. This happened between 5,000 and 2,500 years ago. So even in Europe, the original people were black people. The Europeans that we know today and that are there now were invaders. So you have all these black people in all these different areas being controlled by the Greeks. Now the Greeks were subsequently taken over by the Romans, and the Romans eventually went to Egypt. Now during this time, the Christianity in Egypt was under the worship of Serapis,